Hi, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
We're
It's
back
0 to 100
with
with,
Natasha Serena. How's everyone doing? We
we
always
always give
pretend
a
like
pause.
we hear them. We always pretend like they answer us, Mr. Wilson. So you guys know us. It's Natasha. We got Serena. We're doing the Zoom thing because everyone's quarantined. Y'all know the drill. Everyone's used to it by now. But we have a very, very, very special guest with us. We have Mr. Byron F. Wilson, and he is the founder, the head of the famous Wilson Academy in Decatur, Georgia. How you doing, Mr. Wilson?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us. We really appreciate it. So I actually told Mr. Wilson that we're going to try to keep this to about 45 minutes or so. We all know that people don't really stay tuned in for more than about 45, 50 minutes, about an hour, people start to tune out. And he has already promised that he would come back for a second time if we so need him to. So I just want to put that on the recording so that's
If you still want to at the end of it.
And I want to give a shout out to Keisha too, your assistant, literally amazing. Appreciate her so much. So I want to just take a minute, and I was just going to pick out little points about your bio, but I want everyone to know who you are. I was just so thoroughly impressed with the recent interview that you did that kind of went viral on social media. It was popping up everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. And I actually wanted to know more about you, but you are kind of like a dark knight. Like there's not many photos of you. There's not much information online about you. I don't know how you managed to do that, but you've done it.
Yeah, it's intentional. I have to. It is.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Okay, well, we need to do a whole nother episode about how to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
So bear with me, guys. I'm actually just going to read the amazing bio that Keisha put together for Mr. Wilson. So Mr. Wilson was born in Akron, Ohio in 1976. Mr. Wilson is one of the youngest persons ever to found a middle and high school. Your mother was an elementary school teacher for over 30 years, so education is obviously in your blood. From a very young age, Mr. Wilson was identified as a gifted student. Despite losing his hair at the age of 10 because of a condition called alopecia, Mr. Wilson was able to maintain his focus and positive outlook. Mr. Wilson tested into one of Ohio's top high schools, Archbishop Hoban, where he was a nationally commended student and all-Ohio basketball player. Okay, yeah. See, nothing came up, none of this information.
I know, we got it, yeah.
So y'all getting the backstory because we didn't know any of this. Mr. Wilson's college career began at North Carolina A&T State University, HBCU. After being one of a handful of Black students in his high school, Mr. Wilson chose A&T because he wanted to experience the pride and heritage of an historically Black university. While an Aggie freshman, is that the nickname?
The Aggies, yes, Aggie Pride.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilson was able to help the men's basketball team to an MEAC championship in 1995. For financial reasons, Mr. Wilson decided to return to Ohio to complete his college career. The Ohio State University was his destination. Mr. Wilson competed for the Buckeyes basketball team and won the coveted John Havlicek Award.
John Havlicek.
What is it?
John Havlicek.
Okay. I obviously don't know much about basketball. An award given to the most inspirational player in 1998. Mr. Wilson graduated that year with a dual major business degree. After graduation, Mr. Wilson relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. A successful corporate salesman, Mr. Wilson walked away from a lucrative position in order to pursue a life he felt had more meaning. In 1999, he began a professional tutoring company in which students could get tutoring in the afternoons, evenings, and on weekends. The program was successful, but Mr. Wilson found that the real problem was that the students weren't being properly educated during the day at their respective schools. When a small group of parents asked Mr. Wilson to homeschool their children, he knew what he needed to do. Mr. Wilson would open his own school. Wow. Opening a school would be expensive, and he had no credit for a business loan. So he took a job as a night shift manager at a gas station. Mr. Wilson would work all night, sleep for 3 or 4 hours, and then go to work on building his school. He moved into a low-budget hotel where he could pay weekly in order to control and minimize his bills. After several years of hard work at his tutoring company, Mr. Wilson was able to open his school, AIM Education, at the age of 25. Wow. A few years later, Mr. Wilson's program earned accreditation and he changed the name to the Wilson Academy. Today, the Wilson Academy students are among the most competitive in the state, serving male and female students in grades K through 12. The graduation rate is 100%. Warrior students annually outperform the state on standardized tests, and over 95% of the Wilson Academy's graduates have gone on to a 4-year college or university. Some have attended 2-year schools or trade schools. A STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and financial literacy focused program, Wilson students navigate a unique curriculum designed by Byron F. Wilson. Warrior students have gone to do great things. They boast multiple Dean's List students with majors ranging from pre-med and pre-law to business administration and engineering. Wilson is quoted as saying, "When it's all said and done, I want people to say that we changed the face of education." We encourage you to learn more about the Wilson Academy. I'll add the link to the website, but it's www.thewilsonacademy.org. Now, as the founder of #HowWeFight, Mr. Byron F. Wilson seeks to create consequences to social injustice against Black people through economic empowerment and creating a true African diaspora.
Yeah. That was a lot.
It was worth it though.
Yeah, okay.
Because when I read it before, I, picked out some things here and there, but I was like, really, like, what? I can't leave anything out. It's so impressive.
Well,
and I think it's really because I can't just say some things about you and then tell everyone to go look it up. I couldn't find anything online.
Yeah, if you don't, so it's like if you don't put my middle initial in when you Google, it won't come up.
I did.
Oh, well, I don't know that. I don't know. I'm on the low.
I think you were right the first time. I think that it was intentional. I absolutely 100% think that you have done something to keep yourself underneath the radar, and that's great because I'm sure that you must receive some scrutiny as your position, especially early on. 25 years old, like I was just glad that I could rent a rental car without extra fees at 25.
That's true.
All right, so let's get in. Are you ready?
Okay, yes, absolutely.
Is your shirt is that a How We Fight shirt?
Yeah, this is a How We Fight shirt,
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So do you sell them online?
Yeah, if you go to our website, it's how-we-fight.com or .org. Actually, we have both of them. And you can get a shirt there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, learn more about the organization as well. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna order mine. All right, so Serena, I have talked so much. You want to start off?
I do. I want to thank you again so much for joining us.
No problem.
I have so many questions, and then hearing that bio that I had never, there were a lot of things in there that I'd never heard, and now I have questions about that. But I'm going to jump right in because we do have limited time. Watching some of your videos and you talk, one of the things when I think about what's happening right now, the Black Lives Matter movement and the fight against police brutality, among other things, one of the criticisms that I hear is that there isn't clear leadership within the Black community. And so I was just kind of, I go back and forth on this, but I wanted to get your thoughts on, do you think that is the case? Is that a problem? If so, how can we really address that?
Sure. To be honest, the message is more important than the man or the woman in that case, because really the man or woman is just articulating a strong message, and they do it with a great deal of relatability and charisma. But if you look back to Malcolm X and Dr. King, they had a platform. And so the Nation of Islam's platform they were really the only group that was trying to specifically address the issues facing Black people at the time. So they had a platform. The same thing with Dr. King, nonviolent resistance was a platform. And because most Black people were and still are Christian in terms of their religion, they already had a huge base. So then you had these two charismatic characters that were able to propel that message. I think what we've struggled with is providing one unified message. And so that's what I've tried to do with How We Fight is kind of have a unified message and say, this is who we are, this is who we always are, and we're going to approach problems based on this philosophy every time. So I think that's what we're looking to do. And then also, like I was saying before, just relatability. There was a gap between the civil rights era and now, and integration had a lot to do with that. It's actually been one of the worst things that ever happened to us. I know that might be controversial, but when you look at it, it has not been good for us, actually.
Right.
So I think that's a lot of it as well.
That kind of leads me to one of the other points that I wanted to make. I mean, I was having a conversation with some of my aunts, and I was asking them, you know, how was it back in your day, or how were things? And they said, we had our own stores, and we had our own doctors, and the own people in our neighborhood that we went to. And I said, okay, well, do you think that integration was, do you think it was better back then? And they answered quickly and said, yes. And I was a little shocked because, you know, we've always heard about, you know, the fight, the civil rights movement, and the fight was for integration. And so I wanted to hear from you. Do you think that we're headed towards a type of segregation again? Do you think it's a good thing?
I think we were always segregated. I think segregation, to be honest, I don't really have a problem with the concept of segregation. The reason segregation is a problem is when it's forced, because people naturally separate themselves. I mean, if you think about it, people don't really do anything together other than root for sports teams. I mean, if you know, we have black churches and white churches, even though, you know, you have some people that go to a church, like if the pastor is white, it's a white church, you just black going to white church. So we have black schools and white schools. I mean, people naturally separate themselves, even our community. So I don't think segregation ever ended. I think what happened is integration was a good way to stem the tide of where we were headed. If you look at Dr. King's writing and his speeches leading up to his assassination, he was becoming a lot more like Malcolm X. He was talking a lot more about black economics, and that's when he became a problem and they had to kill him. What I talk about it is dangerous, because money really is the only thing that matters. And so if we are separated, which we always are anyway, but we have economic strength, it really doesn't matter. Like I live in Atlanta, and so I love being able, I may have to make an effort to see a lot of white people, right? Like, so and when I'm in South Africa quite a bit. And so when I'm there, I love that I'm surrounded by black people. So I don't think people necessarily have an issue with segregation unless it's forced on you. And that's the issue, yeah.
That's what's so weird to me. I've had this discussion before. I think now a lot of things make sense, right? So, like, for example, I always talk about now Bernie Sanders makes sense because he's always spoken about universal health care, but everyone's like, that's impossible. And then coronavirus, COVID-19 hits, and everyone's like, we need universal health care. Oh, well, Bernie Sanders said that. Why did y'all vote for him? The racial issues, like things make sense now that didn't really make sense, that were kind of taboo to really talk about before, but now they make sense. So what I don't understand is why we know that money is the focus, right? So of the nation, if not the world, but money's the focus. All they do is make the richer richer and the poor poorer, and they want to keep that as big of a divide as they can.
Sure.
So that's why I like what you say about black dollars and, you know, our spending power. But I just don't understand why they won't grab onto that. Why don't they recognize our spending power, and why won't they prioritize money above racism the way they prioritize money above lives? And, you know.
Well, they do recognize the power of the black dollar. Why do you think they're changing these policies? Why do you think Aunt Jemima has been on that box for so many years? Uncle Ben has been on that box of rice. Why do you think they're changing it now? Well, because they can see we're figuring it out. So it takes extreme circumstances sometimes for people to see the truth, just like you said. It's always been there, but when everybody's comfortable, it's easy to deny it. And so they've always understood that. That's why you see them, at least in theory, bending over backwards to change these superficial things that really have no meaning. But it makes it seem like they're empathetic, right? To change a name, to say you can wear this now, to say you're allowed to kneel down, but it really means that it has absolutely no value as appeasement. But they're doing that in the hopes that we'll take it and feel better and move on and won't remove our black dollars. So they understand that 100%. Yeah.
Right. So what's your response to that? Because, and I'm gonna tie this in with a second question so you can just kind of merge it and talk for a minute, but what's your response to that? And then with regard to segregation, before, when I would have those types of conversations, they weren't received well. I personally feel like in the 60s, they shouldn't have fought for it, and we just should have done our own thing, and then it would have been more obvious, like as far as the competition goes between races, right?
Right.
But then we also have the example of like, we did kind of do that, and then look what happened. But if we continue to still build our own community instead of focusing so much on acclimating and fitting into what, you know, we're supposed to be as to what we naturally are. My issue now with regards to segregation, integration, is the divide of the Black community. I really feel like it's a split where a lot of African Americans can see the benefit of it, but then there's a huge percentage of African Americans and the Black community outside of African Americans that just, they're like, no, we just need to keep fighting for them to treat us okay, but we don't need to separate. We need to be together.
Right. That's because that's comfortable. People like to be comfortable. You know, it's nice to think that people are reasonable. The challenge, if you're familiar with Stokely Carmichael, he said the challenge that Dr. King had is that nonviolent resistance relies on white people's ability, America's ability to have empathy, to be, and so to have a conscience. America doesn't have a conscience. So the concept was, if we don't fight back, America will be forced to look at itself beating on us and say, God, we're monsters, and they'll stop it. In order for that to make sense, America would have to have a conscience. And what we found out is that America has no conscience, so that's ineffective. It's painful to think, if you're honest with yourself, it's painful to think that America probably will never be what we would like it to be for Black people. It's even hard for people to say that. It's not hard for me to say it. I get it, but it's hard for people to say that. It's very uncomfortable. It makes you feel better to believe that you can be reasonable. I don't hate you. Why would you hate me? Right? It's hard to believe, but what you got to go back. The reason that the dollar is the strongest denomination in the world, the reason that the United States is the strongest country in the world, is because they took Black people from an entirely different continent and then forced them to build this country for free. And then they took those people and said, you're going to be nothing but super consumers, and we're not going to legally allow you to create wealth. That's why America is so great. When you go back to that concept, these people were buying us. So for you to expect, it's just like my iPhone. Would I marry an iPhone? Would I give it equal rights? No, because it's an inanimate object that I bought. And so for you to think that we were introduced as property, and somehow we're going to get to the point to where, that's the thing that I have with Black Lives Matter. I would not waste my time trying to convince you that my life is important. I knew that when I was born. I don't need to change your mind. I need to change your behavior. And that does not require me to make you believe that I'm good. You have to look at the deep mentality that's been created in America through white and Black. So white people have been taught that they're better. Black people have also been taught that they're better. So that's why you see the divide. A lot of Black people actually don't believe they're good enough to be equals. They may not say it, but their actions prove it. So there you go. I'm sorry, that was a little bit longer probably than you asked.
I wanted that. Okay, Serena, you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, so one of the things when you talk about, you know, patronizing Black businesses, you know, starting with restaurants and building up our own community and becoming economically strong again, how do we prevent, you know, looking at the history of how we did do that in the past and it was, you know, destroyed and, you know, people came in and, you know, we don't have it anymore. And so how do we protect ourselves from repeating the same cycles of not being able to protect what we have?
Sure, it's the same way that you don't lose a basketball game the same way you lost it before. You watch the film and you see how they beat you, and then you don't make the same mistakes. So the biggest mistake we made, well, I don't even know if it was a mistake, it was just where we were at the time. We couldn't provide any consequences. That's why cops keep killing us, because we have yet to provide any consequences. Here's the bottom line that people don't want to accept. In order for this to stop, it would have to be either damaging monetarily to where it wouldn't be worth it for them to kill one of us, or physically, like someone will have to start killing these cops. Nobody wants to say that. No, I'm not encouraging people to kill police officers. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is one or both of those things would have to occur for this to stop. Now, since I don't see anybody willing to, George Zimmerman is still walking around alive down in Sanford, Florida, down your way, right? So nobody, obviously you're not going to do that. So then we'd have to take the other alternative, which is create some economic consequences. That's the reality. So we can look at what people haven't been able to do in the past because we were isolated. So you look at Black Wall Street, you know, people were bombing them. I don't know if you realize that, like citizens were in the air bombing them in Black Wall Street. But another fact is that the people in Black Wall Street and that community, they actually owned more airplanes than the total airplanes in the airport at Tulsa. So we also could have gotten those planes and fought. We're not a violent people. America speaks a language that we're not speaking. We've been violent with each other in some impoverished communities, but we are not speaking their language. And they understand that, which is why we keep being murdered. White America only speaks two languages. They speak violence and money. You don't believe me? Look back in their history and see if they've made any decisions based on anything other than those two things. Every single progressive moment in white American history has been based on either violence or money or the combination of the two. There's been no other measure.
So is that's basically your reasoning for, I don't know if support is the right word, but at a minimum understanding of the violent protesting, the looting and the rioting?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was inevitable and necessary. Nobody wants to say that. But to be honest, have we not protested before? See how you didn't see the response? We're getting this response for two reasons. Because white people are scared, because we became violent, and because we're starting to talk about money.
Yeah.
And pulling that. If you look at Starbucks, look what happened with Starbucks, right? They said you can't wear Black Lives Matter masks. What black people do? They get on social media and say, well, I'm not going to go to Starbucks. Then like 2 days later, they reverse it, right? And then you have black people talk about, oh, they better head because I wasn't going. Why are you going back? They showed you your power. You should be done with Starbucks forever. But we want coffee. That's why I was talking about comfort. Oh, the Frappuccino is delicious. Okay, fine. That's why you're being murdered for this Frappuccino. Yeah. So it's really very simple. You can't have change without sacrifice. If you guys, I don't know if you've ever worked out or you were athletes, you can't get stronger without going through pain. You can't get in condition without being tired. And for some black people, it's like we want change, but we don't want to be uncomfortable. That's why when I talk about voting and I say, that's not how we're going to get the change we see. It's not going to get it done because it's easy. It requires nothing. You don't even have to know anything about the candidates. You go in and touch a screen. Now, if it was that simple, first of all, black people have been voting for a long time. All these black people that were killed by cops, you had a black president at the time. Voting is not going to solve our problems. And I'm not saying that that's President Obama's fault. I think he's one of the greatest presidents of all time. But the fact remains, voting did not solve our problem. It just didn't. And it won't.
So I have an issue with that because I agree. But if you look at the numbers, so 4 years ago when it was time to vote, almost half of us didn't vote. And right now everyone's talking, I'm not a Biden fan. I don't like him. I don't think he's a good candidate for president at all. However, I think we are at a stage where you do have the lesser of two evils. And I personally, if no other reason, I think it's an embarrassment as a country to have someone like Donald Trump as our president. So my thing is, I don't really know what the response is because so many people now are being vocal about voting doesn't do anything. There's no one to vote for. I'm not voting. And it terrifies me.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting not to vote. What I'm saying is it's not going to solve this particular problem. That's two different things. I'm not saying not to vote. I'm saying it is not going to solve this problem. That is not going to solve police brutality. It's not. So this has been going on for so long. Let's go back to the presidents that you liked. Okay, Obama, was there police brutality? All these people that got killed on these t-shirts, that was during his watch. Go back to Bill Clinton. Actually, if you look at the things that were put in place in the Clinton era, some of the inequities in terms of sentencing that we get, I don't know why Black people love Bill Clinton so much. But the point is, if you go back to the presidents that you did like, there's always been police brutality. The only reasons that the Black Panthers ever existed, police brutality. You keep going back. It doesn't matter who's been in office. That is my point. That's not how you're going to solve that problem. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying not to vote. Voting is important for a lot of other reasons. That's not one of them. And actually, to be honest, you don't influence politicians at the ballot box the way you think you do. You influence them by lobbying. So there are people who a friend of mine is a lobbyist. So there are people, that's their job, is to give money to, it doesn't seem like it would be illegal, right? But that's their job, to give money to politicians to influence them to have legislation that benefits whatever company they represent. So if we really wanted to influence the legislative process, we would put PACs together and lobby. Because at that point, it doesn't matter who wins, we're going to pay them off anyway. Really, really simple. But we want to do it the free way, and we would like to believe that we can just band together and everybody vote, and then this person's going to do the right thing. When has that happened? Like, at what point do we learn from our mistakes?
I think we're getting there. That's actually my dream job, to be a lobbyist.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, working with organizations to try, so I may be a little bit optimistic about some things, but also very realistic. But, when you spoke about the fact that, being comfortable and, not wanting to be uncomfortable, I think part of it is that, like, I need to maintain that optimism to keep going the way that I'm going. Like, I really feel like it requires burning the candle at both ends.
Right.
But I have to hold on to some faith that things are going to get better and that I'm working this hard to affect change. So I think that a lot of it with people, because including myself, so I have a law degree and I've been practicing for a decent amount of time, and there's still so much I don't know because the law is just like as big as this room, if not bigger, with regard to the areas that you can be involved with. So that's why we, Serena and I, want to do more of this to just inform and give people that information about what really needs to be done so that we can affect change. Because people are hitting me up and they're like, okay, how many more people do I need to call? Like, how many more emails do I need to send? Breonna Taylor's murderers are still out there. And how many people have to post this? And so I don't want people to lose momentum, and keep reminding them, but look at what we have accomplished. So let's keep celebrating these little victories while we continue towards this war that we know is coming.
So so here's what I would suggest. I mean, here's what I would offer. Why does focusing on ourselves need to be negative? I think some people relate, not that you are, a lot of people relate it as if focusing on yourself as a community is a negative thing. That's a narrative that was put into our minds. Integration doesn't work otherwise. That was intentional. You have to think about it. So us focusing on us is negative. It's very positive to me. It's almost like if somebody was in a really bad relationship and then they break up. Like, maybe it's sad, but that's a celebration time. You were suffering and now you're not. So for me, I don't look at it as a negative thing. I say, maybe people are realizing that I was wasting my energy in a certain way. Take the same positive energy, but put it in an area where it can actually be productive.
Right.
That's what I mean. I'm not saying, so when we see these things, when you say, I don't know what you consider to be progress, but, for instance, Netflix, they're going to put this money into Black banks. There are some really big problems with that would make it ineffective. However, there are also some things about it that could be very effective depending on how it's all executed. You understand what I'm saying? Like the NFL saying, okay, we were wrong about the kneeling. That could mean absolutely nothing. But depending on how the players respond, it could mean everything. So I'm not saying that some of these things could not be perceived to be progress. Right. What I'm saying is I prefer to put the emphasis and the energy on something that we can control. I just think the time should be up for us to keep for us to continue to put energy into trying to change other people's minds. I just think there was a movement in the past, and even sometimes with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's all about we matter, we matter. Why are we trying to put so much emphasis into convincing people that are obviously Black lives do not matter. If they mattered, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter to them. Accept that. Don't be depressed about it. Take your energy into your own community and address it and create an insulation with that energy. That's what I look at. Why would I spend so much time trying to make you love me? Right? I mean, if you have somebody that's been a devout Christian for 40 or 50 or 60 years, there is nothing that you are going to say with a hashtag or anything else to make them change their minds. Does that seem right? You think you could do that? I'm just going to say, Jesus isn't real. You say, you know what? I've been a Christian all my life, but you know what? Now that you say that, you're right. No, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So you would be better off taking that energy and putting it to people who agree with you and creating something for yourself. That's the way I look at it.
Or into yourself.
Right.
It definitely took me, sorry, Serena, but it definitely took me a while to get that. I was brought, like, it wasn't okay to be selfish. You know, if you're thinking about yourself, right, and that's not okay. Like, don't be selfish. It took me in law school, studying for the bar, and my bar coach saying, like, no, you need to be selfish. I'm like, that's not my style. Like, I don't do that. No, like, it's not anyone in my family's fault that I decided to go to law school. But through that process, I understood what it meant to be a healthy selfish. And through this process, the conversations that I've been having with friends, some of them are strangers that just message me on social media with questions or advice on how to handle things. And everyone's not front line, and your front line may not be the same as my front line. Like, there's different aspects. So you need to get to a place where you are really honing in on your talents and figure out what contribution you can make to the movement.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you saying that, this whole thing, focusing on yourself is a negative thing. I think that's just part of the brainwashing and it not being okay for us to focus on ourselves, for us to be strong, for us to be, this strong, powerful force that is in us. So we're constantly like suppressing something that's naturally in us.
But everyone else has focused. First of all, the white community has always focused on themselves. That's number one. But everybody else does. The Jewish community certainly does. The Italian community, Korean community, everyone but us. But that's because white people have done such a great job of preaching unity. Mm-hmm. And what has happened is it works for them. So like if two companies come together, it's only a merger if the two companies have equal assets. But if I have more assets than you, we didn't merge. Like, that's a takeover, right? We could say that, and that's what integration was. It's never been a merge. It's a takeover. Mm-hmm. It's allowed them access to our best athletes. It's allowed them access to our best students. Like, our best students don't go to the HBCs. Our best students don't play at the HBCs. So it just allowed them access. So that's why they preach unity. Unity actually works well for them.
It does.
Because we buy all of their stuff.
You actually lay out a pretty detailed plan of how we can focus on ourselves and how we can move forward. And you call for us to be economically strong, also physically strong. And you say, you talk about the right to bear arms and that we should as Black people. One of my questions is that what do you say to critics who may say, yes, we should bear arms, but it doesn't necessarily protect us against the things that we're fighting against, like police brutality? When you look at Philando Castile and even Corey Jones right here in my backyard, they both were legal gun owners, and they weren't able to protect themselves. So what would you say to that?
Well, when you jump out of an airplane, the parachute doesn't guarantee that you will live. But I don't think anybody's willing to jump out of the plane without one. I think, nothing is 100%. So in terms of practical life, you have to say, well, what are the chances that I'm safer? And in those situations like Philando Castile, he did everything right. And then look at the outcome. But if you look at like Ahmaud Arbery, if he's strapped, maybe that's different. These are just random guys trying to lynch you. So you're right. There's no 100%, but that's not a reason. A condom isn't 100%, but right?
You
It's
should still
better.
strap up, though.
Say it again.
You should still strap up unless you're trying to kill.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. You don't say, you know what, this is only 90-something%. So you know what? I'm just gonna go. That doesn't even make sense. Yeah.
I just have to take this opportunity for you to go a little bit further with that. I want you to plug it. I've been pushing for a very long time for all Black people to get their permit, for them to understand what the laws are in their state, for them to take classes, for them to bear arms, for them to carry. Now I'm like, carry it everywhere with you. I can have on yoga pants and my pistol's right on my hip or on my thigh, it's somewhere.
Right. Yeah, you know what? To be honest, let me tell you some things. Like the last piece that I picked up, I couldn't even buy what I wanted because the gun that I was looking for was on back order. It was hard to buy ammo. I couldn't get the rounds that I was looking for, to be honest. Like, you can't get hollow tips and stuff. You had to order them. I mean, it's and when I was there, I ended up having to go to a Bass Pro Shop, right? And guns, they're not staying on the shelves. I'm gonna tell you something. I know the images that Black people with guns. I live in Georgia. When you think of Georgia as a Black person, see, you think of Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Georgia is indeed the Confederate South. Mm-hmm. There's this highway, there's a circle around Atlanta called 285. Mm-hmm. When you step outside of that 285, you will be quickly reminded that it is indeed still the Confederate South. These white people are strapped. Mm-hmm. They're strapped. And they have organizations. In fact, there's kind of been an alert this weekend, particularly in Atlanta, about white supremacist groups trying to gun Black people down over July 4th weekend. I don't know how serious it is. I mean, I'm sure, I mean, it's very easy to randomly shoot into a crowd of Black people. Like, we tend to congregate, so it wouldn't be that hard. And some of that may just be to try to keep Black people from protesting on their sacred July 4th holiday. But that gun ownership is, and I know, I get it. Not everybody, most likely you won't ever have to use it. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, if I know that you have it, I do have to think again. I'm telling you, it was just like a couple of my friends and I were talking about when you were dating a girl that had a father, like, you treated her differently. Because there might be some physical consequence. Like, you know that I have daughters. Like, I will kill you over my daughters, like, just like that. And any father feels that way. My point is, when human beings have a threat of physical consequence, they do behave differently. It is what it is. They just do.
That makes me think of Serena when you used to always say, where are the fathers in this situation? Talk about, have to go back and just ask you a couple more questions.
Okay, sure.
Because we talked about here and there about just the generation and like how this, what we consider like the generation under us, like just being a little different. I want to talk to you about your opinion on your generation, our generation, the generations before you, after you, whatever, because one of the things that I often say is we and our ancestors. So I definitely think that while this is our civil rights movement, this is, you know, what I feel like it's a privilege to live through it. I really do, and experience it. I just feel like y'all ain't gonna get the same thing y'all got from in the 1960s. Like, we just different.
Well, I think that I had a conversation about, see, that comment, that pisses a lot of old heads off, because I think what has happened is not your fault. I think what has happened is there's been a picture of weakness being painted. For instance, when we have Black History Month in February here, every afternoon they get to watch a film or documentary, right? I told them, you have one slave film for the whole month. You have one. And I chose Birth of a Nation. I chose the one where we were actually killing people. Mm-hmm. So my thing is, I think the older generation has been characterized as weak, and that wasn't weak. If you ask kids today, nobody is putting dogs on you right now. Nobody is, to be fair, nobody's spraying you with fire hydrant hoses. Nobody is beating you and arresting you. None of that is happening. You are being murdered by the police. That's been consistent. But when you're protesting, nobody's putting dogs on you. So for you to call somebody weak who was able to go, not you specifically, but that kind of bothers a lot of the older generation when you, like those t-shirts, I am not my ancestors. What do you mean by that? what does that mean? Let me actually, you know what?
Yeah.
What does that mean? This shirt, I am not my ancestors. What do you mean by that?
So I obviously cannot answer for everyone else because everyone that wears that shirt has their own opinion as to what that means to them. So I can only answer for myself. That's me, the lawyer, talking to me. I have to get that disclaimer.
Of
But
course.
I have never characterized my ancestors as weak. I just personally feel like they were more compliant, and we're more like, I don't give a, like, we, like, you gonna do this and whatever. And while we aren't getting sprayed with water hoses, when we are protesting, they're shooting us at point blank range with rubber bullets. Not me, but other people that were protesting at the exact same time that I was here in Fort Lauderdale. They're spraying them very, very close proximity with tear gas and pepper spray. So those are just as harmful situations. However, just like the our ancestors were, we continue to show up still, right? So I would never, ever, ever characterize them as weak because they have paved the way for us to be able to take it to another level. However, when I look at, the sit-in at Woolworth and them just sitting there and taking that, there's no way. Like, I mean, I don't even know what handcuffs feel like, but I had the mentality of like, all right, well, I mean, I could probably do it. I could probably do it all right. So I'm not afraid and I'm not scared. I'm not going to comply. I'm not going to take it. And I feel like a lot of us are like that. So that's what I think when I say like we are not our ancestors. We're not going to say, yes, please, can we please have this? We're going to say like, no, we're like, oh, this. You're going to give it to us.
I think there was a lot of strength. I see that as having strength. I mean, when somebody posted something about Rosa Parks the other day, and it really made me mad because they were talking about her being, she was a peaceful protester. Why can't these people do that? And I was like, a lot of people don't understand that Rosa and people like her, they train for a long time to be able to show that type of restraint when people were in their face with, hatred and bigotry and violence. And so I think that shows a great deal of restraint. When I think of my ancestors, even in their being compliant or having to go along with what the laws were, however unfair they were, when people say, well, I wouldn't have taken that, I would have done this. And I am grateful for my ancestors, especially I always think back all the way to the Middle Passage, that somebody in my bloodline had to endure that for me to be here today. So exactly. I look at them as having incredible strength.
Yeah.
Take that back to them before you start. Just please take that back to them, because that's now two people. And I really feel like the people that I know, like my friends, my colleagues, I've never heard anyone say, like, man, them people was weak. Like, we stronger. No, I feel like they were tougher. And if anything, we not willing to sit there and write all of that.
Yeah, but when you wear these shirts and that's saying just the opposite. When you're wearing a shirt and it says, I am not my ancestors, it implies to any reasonable human being that you are going to give a stronger response than did your ancestors. So all I'm saying is, I think that is a narrative that is inaccurate.
Okay.
So if you think about it, if you had the Black Panther Party right now, you wouldn't be dealing with it. See, were they weak? They're walking around with semi-automatic machine guns. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, I just think that's a mischaracterization that people were compliant. They weren't compliant. They had a strategy that they all agreed upon.
That's what we
on that side, right? That was as she was saying, there was training involved. It takes a lot of strength to be hit and not hit somebody back. It's actually much easier to hit somebody back because that's natural. Even animals defend themselves. So I think now that would not have been my choice. I'm much more of a Malcolm than I am Martin in the early part of Martin's life, as he did evolve. But that's just a personal choice. It's just me. It's just my demeanor. But I don't think there's anything weak about the nonviolent resistance, and I don't think they were compliant. If anything, you got to, okay, for example, the bus boycott, that was 381 days. What have you all, listen, this whatever generation this is, they have never done anything for 300 any days.
Probably won't.
Nothing. So I don't know about that. What I will say is I'm kind of a hybrid. So I'm at that age where I'm in between two generations and I work with young people. So my knowledge of youth is a little bit above the curve. Like there's some music that I listen to that I'm 44, by the way. So there's some music that I listen to that other 44-year-olds have never heard.
Like what?
You see, well, like every day I'll wake up and I listen to Freestyle by Lil Baby. So a lot of people don't, you see what I'm saying? Like that's my morning song. So what I'm saying is like, there's some things that I'm privy to. Like I may know who a TikToker is, like they don't even know. So I'm just saying, so I have a different experience. But then also, like I know old heads. I'm talking about some G's in Atlanta that, you know what I mean? Some remnants of the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And there's a disconnect, particularly here in Atlanta. So what happens is there was, it's like a relay race. Somebody's supposed to extend their hand with the baton and somebody else is supposed to take the baton. Mm-hmm. It was like a leg missing. And there's just like a stretch where nobody had the baton. And what happens is we lost momentum in a movement because, and this is something that people are not talking about, and I'm watching it happen right now. You know what happened? Our narrative got jacked. It got jacked just like Kaepernick got jacked. Think about what happened. Kaepernick clearly said, I am kneeling because I don't feel comfortable being in a country that's doing nothing about police brutality. I just don't feel comfortable standing for this flag right now. Mm-hmm. He was very specific. And what did your president do? Your president immediately made it about the flag and the military. Mm-hmm. Kaepernick never used the word flag or military, but that's what it became about, and white people embraced it, and then it was gone. It wasn't even about it was just, he wasn't trying to orchestrate anything. He made a personal decision. He said, I am not cool today standing for, and actually he did it for 2 weeks before anybody even noticed.
Exactly, it was peaceful.
So what happens is, the same thing happened in the civil rights era. You know what happened to civil rights? First of all, the term civil rights. It's not civil rights, it's black rights. Everybody else had their rights. That's an example of it. What happened? The women's movement attached themselves to it. Now, be clear when I say this, I have nothing against women's rights. But what happens when you have look at what's happening now. First is Black Lives Matter. Now it's Black Trans Lives Matter. Now soon it's gonna, just watch, just trust me, watch. History always repeats itself. Now you see the Native Americans attaching themselves. You see Pepsi and these companies pulling out on the Washington Redskins, talking about they need to change the Washington Redskins. What's gonna happen is everybody's gonna attach themselves, and it's about being together, and it'll lose the black narrative. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that happened to us. It was about improving black people's lives. And what happened is, what they did was they threw a bone to some black people. So you see an Oprah, you see a Michael Jordan, you see an Obama, and you say, oh, we can make it. When if you would just really look at the dynamic, nothing changed. I always say, like, we let one brother go to the MLB and we gave up a whole baseball league. We had a whole baseball league and they gave one brother an opportunity to play in the MLB and we just abandoned the whole league. So, but that's what happened. So I don't fault the youth. There's always been, listen, the older generation has always conflicted with the youth. The youth have the energy, but they don't make any sense. The old people make sense, but they don't have the energy. That's why they come together, because one provides what the other one lacks. Mm-hmm. But we haven't been able to come together because there's such a huge disconnect. Mm-hmm. There's a lack of respect on both ends. So I've tried to so it's like the things that I post on IG it's different. It's got to be a different feel than when I'm on Facebook. I'm telling you, there's a huge disconnect in that regard.
We've got more of this conversation coming your way with part 2 of What's Next with Byron F. Wilson. Also, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook and send us your question and comments. You can find us at 0 to 100 Podcasts. Bye, guys.